Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question, and that is to discuss how codependence is created in a narcissist or psychopathic relationship. Basically, codependence is a big movement or a big epiphany or discovery. I would say maybe in the late 90s, Melanie Beattie's book, Codependent No More. I mean, these are all great reads, and I would recommend any books on codependence for viewers who have struggled sort of through the emotional tug of war, just to understand the dynamic that is created when you're in a relationship with someone who is a narcissist or psychopath, someone who has sort of, always trying to seek a one up over you. They're always sort of, trying to get ahead of you, play you down, play you off, play you on, play you. I mean, there's just a lot of mind games that tend to go on in these types of relationships, though that don't typify healthy relationships. And the narcissist has to sort of keep this leverage over the relationship, meaning power, meaning they have sort of the final say on everything. They don't allow you to sort of cast your vote as an equal weight. Things don't sort of balance out in the relationship. They're really counting on this in the relationship and create a dynamic or a role for others that oftentimes people were unaware of, a role that they were entering into that would be disempowering or take them out of their best life, their best potential, their purpose, their strength, their talent, their I am, that is, how they want life to be. And mainly, number one is your happiness. So let's really talk about happiness as it relates to the development of codependence. I would say in the beginning, your happiness is really one of your most precious gifts, and that is sort of given up for the narcissist. There's something that calculates in the mind that this person, deserves the most precious gift of all, and that is my heart, my soul, my mind, my time, my energy, my enthusiasm, my passion, my undivided attention. Something about you was all there, full throttle involved. I would say that's part of, the commitment then that one makes to themselves. But simultaneously, there is a pocket or a void of self-deprecation, self-denial, self-annihilation, sort of self-sabotage that is built into that commitment, which is at the unconscious or subconscious level away from awareness. In other words, that you feel that this is the most powerful kind of love. That if I would lay my jacket down, if I would lay myself down for this person, if I would be their bridge over their troubled waters, I would get their approval. They would like me enough. It's just like, and it's sort of like you kind of feel like this, there's a gift that you have to give that you that you give to them, that you forsake yourself. So I think this is really giving away of your power, and a certain sort of self-esteem or a self-respect that becomes sort of in the name of self-sacrifice. So, and a lot of people, I would think, in the cultural mindset, there's a lot of, in the collective unconscious that teaches this, hard work, self-sacrifice. You've got to break a couple eggs to make an omelet. In other words, you got to break your back a little bit in order to get ahead. This is the city of the big shoulders, or whatever it is. There's a certain mentality, I think, that fuels, is like the gasoline or the lighter fluid or the lantern oil that sort of burns the light for you in this relationship, but you don't realize that it's consuming you also. So there's part of this sort of being consumed by the relationship, all consuming. But this feels very much like commitment for the highest cause or for the highest good. So I would say in the beginning in the love bombing of the relationship, which usually means in the beginning phase, where you fell head over heels, triple flip backwards, bouncing off the walls, hanging from the chandeliers, throwing your underwear out the window or whatever it was out the window, whatever it is, where you're like, this is, what it's about for me. Usually there's that sort of inner dialogue, I would say, that creates the dynamic of codependence, but there's usually something very trepidatious or very fragile about this, is that, usually this is then made with a narcissist who has a certain, or even a psychopath, who puts forth a facade or an as if, really as a surrogate binder or connector in the relationship. So you don't get a chance to be in the authentic feelings of the narcissist or the psychopath because they're hidden from view. They are not communicated. They are off on reserves. This is, a special bottle of emotions that you don't get to drink from. This is, their thoughts in their diary that's in their security deposit box at their bank. I mean, in other words, you feel that there's a certain distance or respect that you give this person, and don't, make unreasonable demands, in fact, to be easy on them. And I would say usually there's something, that I would say that there's, a lessening of your problems, and then an enlarging of them, and then a feeling that you will be able to be strong enough to rescue them from themselves. So there's this sort of, I would say, inner dialogue that sort of, checks in with yourself and goes, you know what, I'm strong enough for this, or I'm good for this, or, this person is pleased with me, and I will then, please them in this way, or I will help them in this way. So it becomes very much of a sort of their needs become to replace your needs. In other words, satisfying their needs is enough for you. If you forsake your own, that becomes like all of a sudden the right thing to do, that you don't have to climb the ladder. You don't have to, it's your opinions are too little. Your issues are made too small, insignificant. You're too needy, or we're not going to do that. We're not going to focus on that. We're not going to attend to that. Whatever it is. And then there's this sort of, oftentimes with a narcissist, there's this perfectionism as well. So you feel like you're sort of giving up a small mind for theirs. There's a real sort of handoff, if you will, meaning that their needs become more important than your needs, and you sort of replace their approval with your needs. So instead of your needs, it becomes their needs become your needs. So people then adopt their needs as more important. They always are putting others first. So it feels like, it's altruistic. You get a pat on the back, you did this, but it's even, women putting men first. They don't get a chance, then in these relationships, oftentimes, for the man to put the woman first. So you get a lot of role reversals situations. Men that become too soft, or women that become too hard, in the course of the relationship, in order to handle or deal with the imbalance that is bound to occur in the relationship. And then, the problem with codependence is meaning that you sort of are sacrificing your needs, your feelings, your goals for another. And then the approval then becomes what you base your, the other person's happiness is what you base your needs on. So you need to make them happy. So this is really the beginning, I would say, of, this is maybe where a lot of the crisis, that interpersonal sort of maybe in the formative stages where, you're not really sort of, clued in, but just these are sort of subconscious decisions that I'm helping to sort of articulate and bring to the surface, so you can kind of understand this leg of the journey where it's like, how did I get here? Where am I? Where do I want to go? And how do I check in? How do I truly find my compass when it's been so buried? It's been so out of tune. It's the the glass is too scratched. I can barely read it. It's got all these scars over it. It's got all these scratches. Don't look at it. Don't look at, like a vinyl record, that move the needle over too quickly, or it was a bad quality needle, or it ruined your record or something. So it's kind of like your record, if you will, if you're from back in the day when we actually had vinyl records and you'd buy a needle and then play it, but if the vinyl had a groove, it wouldn't play. So that's kind of like what codependence, it creates sort of a broken groove, if you will. Your song doesn't play all the way through. Part of, for people who are really suffering, their song, other people's song then becomes their song. In other words, everything you do becomes a reaction to the abuser's behavior. And I'm saying abusive because meaning that people will exploit, take advantage of, and use others as supply in this type of relationship. And then this sort of codependency is created. And codependency, I believe it comes back from maybe a Al-Anon term where it was meant to be the enabler to an alcoholic. And that was called a codependent, I believe. And meaning that, if there was an alcoholic that was addicted to, alcohol was ruining their life, running their life, in control of their life, causing them blackouts, employment problems, this of course then would become a family problem. And, then the enabler or the person oftentimes who couldn't, address this was called a codependent, which means, that they were kind of codependent on the alcohol as well, which is very weird. Yuck. Who wants to be in control by a toxic substance, that you can't control or is not healthy for you? So it's a similar situation, I guess. That's where the term comes from historically. But I think once you're in this, it becomes very easy to slip back into that mindset if you don't sort of correct it or use the role of metacognition, the ability to think about what you're thinking about and sort of understand and do this work and sort of get to know, what makes you tick, and namely what makes you happy. I would say happiness is got to be an end result in life for you, and it does not to be instead replaced for fear, obligation, and guilt. Because I would say in the beginning formative times of a codependent with a narcissist, they're sort of foregoing their happiness, they're foregoing their love, they're going their needs for attention, they're foregoing their needs for sort of strengthening themselves and getting what you call self-esteem, a positive sense of self-regard. But this then becomes, it feels wrong because there's too much grief that is sort of set up in the relationship. So, if you have made that your number one goal, that everything that you do then is sort of in reaction or responsive for approval from this narcissist, or not only is sort of looking for their approval, their satisfaction, but then really what makes them happy, because ultimately you'll see that, they become very unhappy. And then a lot of people then begin to feel, that's the narcissist discontent, but a lot of people who are around them tend to then, especially young children or young adults, begin to feel that they are the cause of the unhappiness. So they, they don't want unhappiness in their environment. So, of course you then look to correct it. And then so it becomes an automatic process. Codependency then becomes like second nature, and you sort of forget where you are at. It's always about, making sure that it becomes almost like a rescue mission. And I would say at some course, because they're able to observe in the narcissist or a psychopath that either that there's some spoken or unspoken malady or problem or issue or struggle, that you want to be there for. So the empathy is ringing, your empathy is growing while their narcissism is growing. And so, people then, of course, they will then value the relationship, and then so they'll end up foregoing their own boundaries going above and beyond or what have you for this person, and then their own self is getting smaller in the distance. It's just like, they've almost waved themselves goodbye for the sake of the health and the life of this person. So it becomes a very strange dynamic. And so, I think it helps to explain why it's so difficult to register your own happiness or make that as a worthwhile pursuit, because of a guilt, a fear, or an obligation, a fog that has been sort of laid down, if you will, around the development of a narcissist relationship, where they're taking supply. They need others to be supportive, and it's they're looking for that ego stroke, but they don't give like in return. So that's part of the problem. And then why do really people stay? I would say it's to make them happy. That's the ultimate goal, and that becomes like the penultimate reward. And then I think then people stay because they do a lot of this rationalization and justification that that person's happiness like gave them the best feeling in the world. So in other words, you have to realize to what degree have you given up your self-respect to make somebody else happy. Part of this is like forgoing your needs for another. This becomes really unsustainable and not necessary. Just like when somebody has a big temper tantrum, and I think the mother goes, "Was that really necessary?" And maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but you have to ask, is all this suffering really necessary? And you have to look at the degree of the suffering that you are maintaining in your own hands. It's like, how bumpy a ride do you want it to make it to be? Are you just keeping going over the rocks? Are you sitting on the rocks? Are you throwing the rocks? Are you painting the rocks? What are you doing with the struggle? How are you alchemizing it or adapting, dealing, coping, emerging, stronger from yourself, and not feeling like less than, or that you've got a big bite taken out of your soul and you're still like, ow, you've got a big gauze bandage, you're walking around all day holding your pain in. I mean, this is an emotional pain. It does get better with time. It is very difficult, though, I would say, to find center and for that to feel comfortable. So this, again, is a full body healing that needs to take place. There's usually a lot of threats, that go with, that go with, the relationship. It can become very threatening, especially when it comes to you knowing the truth or reality. So oftentimes that's part of what has been hidden from you is a certain truth, a certain reality. So I think that accounts for a lot of the fear and the terror that like something is going on that you don't know about. And this you perceive as an attack. It feels like a personal attack, which is you're hardwired in these situations to basically to ignite the fight or flight, which is, that crisis mode, that rapid heartbeat, rapid breathing, the eyes getting big, the stress, life becomes a fire drill all the time. So don't be fooled. It's very easy to go back for those few happy moments, a picture, a this, a that, a remembering, and to then want to take them back, for the good times. But you have to remember, the bite, don't forget what is really happening, and that your happiness is okay. It is okay for you to be happy. It is okay for you to be stable. It is okay for you to seek steadiness and consistency, that there's nothing boring about you being accepted. There's nothing wrong with you being approved of. There's nothing wrong with you being loved. There's nothing wrong with somebody going, applauding your accomplishments and giving you support. This is usually the main thing that the others will deprive you of, is part of that beginning, I would say, in the creation of the codependency, which is something you really want to move away from. and it becomes, you can kind of look at it as, an emotional habit that you would like to change and correct, and that you have the power and the ultimate, just amazing ability to change this. I mean, it's a miracle, but you have to give yourself the credibility. You have to give yourself the trust. You have to give yourself the self-respect to know that you are enough and you've got the power just sort of to pull back the self-respect and not go back to an abusive pattern. You really have to have that will and sort of breathe through that. So it's not a tension, it's not a force, but it's a desired, it's a desired I am to be comfortable. And you might have to get through some degree of discomfort, growing pains to get there. But number one, your happiness is okay. Your needs are okay. You don't have to feel obligated to go back to an abuser, to feel guilty for not going back, for not sort of, or fearful of moving on. So really examine some of those uncomfortable feelings. And instead, what truly makes you happy? What really makes you confident? What truly ignites your passion and gives you strength and self-respect? I think, some of those decisions and those determinations and those aha moments will help to bring you into center and to focus. And then really you have to then resensitize yourself according to your strengths and your own sort of internal leadership, if you will, and sort of move away from the guilt, move away from the obligation, and move away from the fear, which, is kind of taking you gently into a wrong direction. Sort of gently move it into the positive, and then say, in this case, what would really make me happy? What would make me even more happy? And then even after that, what would even make me even happier? What would make me feel even better? And even better than that, I really can focus on. And, so you it's okay then to find and then fill your own cup up without having to look over your shoulder to make sure, that someone else is sort of observing it. So self-esteem, meaning that, self-esteem doesn't look for outside approval, or it doesn't, give itself away or cave into that fear. So self-esteem means you can kind of hold a positive sense of self, despite being in the presence of a negativity or a manipulation or something toxic, that you are more tuned in within, and that has more weight, more credence, more credibility, and a weight, if you will, and that is more powerful, that is one up over abuse, and if you don't want to put that person as their name, but, over mistreatment. So in other words, you want to sort of be able to sculpt from the inside and rehabituate, meaning get a new habit going for yourself and keep it going solid for at least 30 days. You have to work with your equipment and then what you have, which is, understanding your heart, the habit making, your decision making, your emotions, and getting those all in alignment and enforcing them. I'm a big believer in writing things down. Write it down. I'm going to have, today is an awesome day. Write it in big, expensive ink, whatever, oh my God, I shouldn't use this nice a marker just to write a silly. Yes, you should. You need to make the mark for yourself and then develop sort of that feedback with your environment, and create this sort of positive habits and, make them for yourself, and then surround yourself with other positive inputs, other positive information that enriches your heart, your cup, your self-respect, and then, groups of people as well, where you can, this is all about the recovery date, so you get a good practice of doing this. So really, I would say it doesn't mean you have to make, I would say, what you really stay for, to make them happy while you make yourself unhappy. And you have to ask yourself, well, why am I staying in a relationship that's making me unhappy? Why is this? And then realize that, your happiness is a reality. Your happiness is already there. You just have to stumble upon it. So keep that kind of as, I would say, your goal today. Your happiness is your goal. And, and find out what that means. And then don't be afraid to write it down. It's, but peace and harmony, I'm 53. Okay, great. Write it down. I'm 62. Okay, great. Write it down. Peace and harmony, I should remember this by now. Well, sometimes you don't. People don't remember what makes them happy, and they easily forget, and then they cave in. So let's, do the behavior modification a little bit more on that path and see how you like, feeling good. And, check those off, write it down. And then also, on the flip side, don't be afraid to write down what makes me unhappy. So you get to know this in the spur of the moment, because it might just come, just like a spark, like for 5 seconds, this is really, and then you can sort of get rid of or eliminate what makes you unhappy. And then you can be more inclusive of what does make you happy, and then see if you can then, steer the boat and, and then life should get easier. Life should get better. And you should be able to have a better sort of circuit reinforcement with you and your environment. So your environment is then positive, and then reflecting of the positive versus the fear, obligation, or guilt that oftentimes is, the predecessor of the codependence and giving away your personal power, otherwise, your self-esteem. So happiness, and then positive self-regard, positive self-respect, developing this, knowing what this is, becoming finally attuned and aware to it, and then acting on it and enforcing it through the tools of writing it down. And it's your own, it's like custom made really for you. I mean, this is really what your happiness is. It's custom made for you. And also sort of your unhappiness, become very well aware and do not feel fearful, obligated, or guilty to stay where what makes you unhappy. It's your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.